Have you ever been caught in a moment, feeling a sudden, chilling drop in your stomach, convinced that you are fundamentally flawed? A sense that if people knew the real you, they would turn away in disapproval? This feeling, this silent, invisible judge that follows your every move, whispering that you're not good enough, not worthy, is a universal human experience, yet it keeps us locked in the most solitary of prisons. It is the root of our deepest anxieties and our most self-destructive habits. If this message resonates with the depths of your soul, if you've ever felt the cold touch of this shadow, know that you are not alone on this journey. Acknowledge this connection by liking this video and consider subscribing to join a community of souls dedicated to awakening. Share in the comments below with a simple, "I am ready to heal," because today we bring this shadow into the light. The great teacher and philosopher John Bradshaw once revealed a profound truth that unlocks the chains of so many of our struggles. Shame is the root of all human compulsions. This isn't just a clever phrase. It's a divine key, a sacred map that guides us back to the source of our deepest wounds and, ultimately, to our most profound healing and liberation. Imagine a silent, unseen force, a spiritual poison that operates in the deepest shadows of the human psyche. It is a vibration so subtle yet so powerful that it can shape the very architecture of your life. This force doesn't announce its arrival with a thunderclap. It seeps into the foundations of your being, drop by drop, corroding your sense of self-worth from the inside out. It is a master of illusion, distorting your perception of your own divine value, making you believe you are less than you truly are. It works with a brutal, chilling precision, drawing invisible lines and erecting invisible walls that define the absolute limits of what you believe you deserve to experience, to feel, to become. It dictates the boundaries of the joy, love, and abundance you allow into your life. This is not a force that imposes its will through physical violence or overt aggression. Its power lies in its psychological subtlety, in its masterful ability to weave itself into the fabric of your thoughts until its voice becomes indistinguishable from your own. This invasive, soul-diminishing energy has a name that many of us are afraid to even speak aloud. Its name is shame. It is the hidden parasite of the soul, and it is time to expose it to the light. Few emotions are as profoundly misunderstood, and yet so deeply embedded in the collective human consciousness, as shame. We often confuse it with its cousin, guilt, but they operate on entirely different frequencies. You must understand this distinction, for it is the first step toward your freedom. Guilt is an emotion of action. It is a healthy signal from your soul's internal compass. When you feel guilt, your higher self is gently communicating, the action you took was not in alignment with your true nature, with your inherent goodness. Guilt focuses on a specific behavior. It whispers, "I did something wrong." This is a call to reflection, to correction, to making amends. It is a constructive energy that, when honored, leads to growth, learning, and a deeper connection to your own moral code. It serves to polish the soul, to help you realign with the path of your highest good. It is a divine course correction, an opportunity to learn and evolve. It is a sacred tool of awareness. Shame, however, operates on a much more insidious and destructive level. It is not concerned with what you did. It launches a direct assault on who you are. Shame bypasses the action and goes straight for the core of your identity. It doesn't whisper, "I did something wrong." It screams into the very essence of your being, "I am something wrong." Do you feel the vibrational difference in those statements? One is about a temporary misalignment. The other is a damning verdict on your entire existence. While guilt can be a catalyst for positive change, shame is an emotional parasite that feeds on silence, on secrecy, and on the relentless cycle of self-accusation. It is the poison that contaminates your identity, making you believe that you are inherently flawed, defective, and fundamentally unworthy of love, belonging, and joy. Shame convinces you that your very being is a mistake. It infiltrates your sense of self, making you believe that your true nature is something to be hidden, something to be ashamed of. It is this subtle, yet devastatingly profound detail, the shift from doing to being, that holds the key to its destructive power. Guilt can be resolved through apology and changed behavior, but shame demands the annihilation of the self. This destructive force does not simply appear out of thin air in our adult lives. Its seeds are planted in the fertile ground of our earliest years, often in ways that are almost imperceptible. The journey of shame begins in the tender vulnerability of childhood, a time when our sense of self is as fragile as a newborn flower. It takes root not through grand, dramatic traumas, but through the accumulation of small, seemingly insignificant moments. It hides in the disapproving gaze of a parent when a child expresses an emotion deemed too much. It lurks in the subtle, yet cruel, comparison between siblings, where one is praised while the other is implicitly judged as less than. It embeds itself in the careless critiques about a child's body, their natural way of moving, or the unique facets of their emerging personality. A child, still without the spiritual and emotional resources to question these powerful messages from the gods of their world, their caregivers begins to internalize these judgments, not as opinions, but as absolute truths. The child's mind, in its innocent and receptive state, cannot yet differentiate between its actions and its identity. So, when told, "You are being naughty," for simply exploring their world with messy curiosity, they don't hear, "Your action is inconvenient." They hear, "There is something fundamentally wrong with you." When their tears are met with impatience, they don't learn that the adult is stressed. They learn that their feelings are a burden and should be suppressed. They internalize the devastating idea that something is inherently wrong, not with what they did, but with who they are. And so, the great fragmentation begins. The soul, which was born whole and perfect, starts to break apart. In order to be accepted, to receive the love that is as vital as air and water, the child learns to hide the parts of themselves that have been deemed unacceptable. To be loved, they must conform to the expectations of others. Their pure, unfiltered authenticity is sacrificed on the altar of approval. A chasm is created between the true self, the radiant, divine spark within, and the false self, the carefully constructed mask designed to be pleasing, to be acceptable, to avoid the pain of rejection. Over time, as these messages are repeated and reinforced by family, teachers, and society at large, they crystallize. They transform from external voices into a constant, relentless internal monologue. An invisible judge is installed within the psyche, a vigilant warden who scrutinizes every step, every thought, every natural impulse with deep suspicion. This internal critic becomes the gatekeeper of your life, policing your desires, suffocating your emotions, and steering you away from any trace of vulnerability. This is why so many adults live their lives trapped within the confines of their own minds, encased in a prison of their own making, yet built with the bricks and mortar of others' judgments. They live in a state of constant self-surveillance, terrified of making a mistake, of being seen, of being exposed as the fraud they secretly believe they are. They have been conditioned, programmed at a soul level, to believe that showing who they truly are in all their imperfect, messy, beautiful humanity would make them utterly unworthy of love, respect, or belonging. Shame, then, evolves from a painful emotion into a sophisticated system of control. It becomes a psychological mechanism that prevents the individual from living freely and authentically. You learn to adapt, to mold yourself, to hide. Not because you consciously choose to, but because, on a deep, unconscious level, you feel you need to in order to survive. The longer this psychic structure operates without being challenged, the more it fuses with your very identity. It becomes a case of mistaken identity, where the voice of the conditioned ego is confused with the voice of the soul. The person stops realizing they feel ashamed and begins to believe they simply are shameful. They identify with the feeling, believing they are, in fact, inferior, inadequate, defective. This video exists as a divine interruption, a pattern breaker, a call to awakening. It is here to help you break that vicious cycle. Its purpose is to reveal the hidden gears of this soul-crushing mechanism and to show you, with absolute clarity, that shame is not an absolute truth about who you are. It is, rather, a learned system, a conditioned response, a phantom imposed and maintained by the fear of social judgment. Understanding how shame is formed, how it operates, and most importantly, how to deactivate its power, is one of the most liberating and transformative steps a human being can take on their spiritual path. And that is exactly what you are about to discover now. To truly grasp the devastating power of shame, it is absolutely essential to differentiate it from guilt, an emotion with which it is so often and so tragically confused. Though both are connected to feelings of inadequacy or wrongdoing, you must understand that they operate on radically distinct levels of the human psyche. They carry vastly different consequences for your spiritual and emotional development. Guilt, when it is aligned with your moral awareness, is actually a healthy and constructive emotional response. It serves as a sacred alert system. It's the divine signal that alerts you to the fact that you have done something that violated your own deeply held values or has caused harm to another person. When genuinely felt and consciously processed, guilt is a powerful catalyst. It can lead you to repair, to learn, and to grow. It is like an emotional traffic signal, a clear indicator from your higher self that something needs to be corrected. It guides you back into alignment. It does not, however, compromise the essence of who you are. The message of guilt is simple and clear. You did something wrong. Fix it. Learn from it. Evolve. It is a call to action, not a condemnation of your being. Shame, on the other hand, is a toxic, malignant force. It transcends the boundary of behavior and directly impacts your very identity. It does not say you did something bad. It asserts that you are bad. This seemingly subtle difference carries devastating implications for your soul's journey. While guilt preserves a sense of dignity and the potential for redemption, shame completely destroys it. It silently and relentlessly corrodes your self-esteem, poisons your self-perception, and transforms every mistake, every rejection, every perceived imperfection into irrefutable evidence of your existential inadequacy. People who are dominated by the frequency of shame do not say, "I made a mistake." Their inner voice, the voice they have come to believe is their own, says, "I am a mistake." And when this feeling becomes chronic, when it becomes the baseline vibration of your existence, it not only limits the authentic expression of your soul, but it also forms the toxic foundation of a deeply wounded identity. It is from this wounded place that so many destructive behavior patterns are born. Extreme perfectionism, paralyzing procrastination, the compulsive need to please others, and even self-destructive behaviors like addictions all take root in the fertile, dark soil of unresolved shame. They are all desperate, unconscious strategies to either compensate for or to hide from what the person believes to be a fundamental, unfixable flaw within themselves. Shame is a silent but relentless predator. Unlike guilt, which can be rationally processed and resolved, shame seeps into the very cells of your body. It embeds itself in your emotional memory, in your unconscious gestures. It manifests in downcast eyes, in a rigid posture, in a constant tension in the shoulders. It reveals itself in the difficulty to expose oneself, to accept compliments, to truly accept oneself, and ultimately, in the inability to love oneself. And perhaps the most dangerous part of all is that it camouflages itself. We often don't even realize that we are operating from a place of deep shame because it has become so normalized, so integrated into our way of being, that we mistake its whispers for reality. But where, after all, does this corrosive energy begin? How does something so destructive settle so early and so deeply within the human mind? In the next section, we will journey back to the very origins of shame, and we will discover how, from our earliest moments in childhood, we are systematically trained to believe that there is something inherently wrong with simply being who we are. Shame does not arise with the human being. It is not an inherent part of your divine blueprint. It is constructed, it is conditioned, and it is transmitted, often from one generation to the next. No child comes into this world believing that there is something fundamentally wrong with them. On the contrary, the natural default state of the human soul is one of pure authenticity. It is the uninhibited expression of desires, emotions, and impulses without fear, without judgment, without censorship. Watch a young child at play. They are a force of pure, unadulterated life energy. They laugh loudly, cry freely, and express their needs without a second thought. This pure and spontaneous state, however, often begins to be repressed very early in life. And tragically, it is usually repressed by those very people who should be protecting and nurturing that authenticity. Our parents, our caregivers, our teachers, and the broader society as a whole. It all starts with small gestures that seem harmless on the surface. A disapproving look when a child cries, teaching them their sadness, is an inconvenience. A subtle comparison to a sibling, planting the seed of not good enough. An impatient comment in response to a curious question, signaling that their inquisitiveness is annoying. An exaggerated punishment for something that was merely an attempt to explore the world, instilling a deep sense of being bad. It is in these crucial, formative moments that the child begins to internalize a dangerous, soul-wounding message. If I am myself, I will be punished. If I express what I truly feel, I will be rejected. If I show who I really am, I will not be loved. This process of internalization is deeply traumatic, even if it occurs without any shouting or explicit aggression. The child, driven by the primal biological need for belonging and survival, learns to shape their behavior to fit the expectations of the adults around them. They begin to repress emotions that are considered ugly: anger, sadness, frustration. They learn that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness, that being spontaneous is inappropriate. And thus, the first psychic division arises. The true, authentic self is locked away in a hidden inner chamber, and a mask, a false self, is created in its place. This mask is the persona, an identity construction shaped not by who the person truly is, but by who they believe they need to be in order to receive acceptance and love. John Bradshaw, in his seminal work, Healing the Shame That Binds You, describes this false self as a form of psychic survival. The individual alienates themselves from their own divine essence in order to avoid the excruciating pain of being rejected. But this alienation comes at a terrible price. It generates a profound internal void, a constant gnawing feeling of inadequacy, and an insatiable lifelong quest for external validation to fill the emptiness within. Over time, this dynamic becomes completely automatic. The adult who was once that child learns to censor their own thoughts and emotions even before they are expressed. They don't even realize they are hiding anymore because they have long forgotten who they were before they learned to adapt. And worse still, they often begin to judge and reject others with the same rigidity and harshness with which they were once judged. Internalized shame doesn't just trap us. It becomes a pattern that we unconsciously perpetuate in our relationships, in our parenting, and in our professional lives. It is a self-reinforcing cycle of pain. But to break it, we must first understand how this shame, once implanted, transforms into a relentless system of internal surveillance, a psychological mechanism that prevents us from living with freedom and truth. In the next section, we will explore how shame becomes the inescapable judge that controls our every move, keeping us small and afraid. Once installed, shame ceases to be just a reactive emotion and transforms into a true system of psychic surveillance. It becomes a constant presence, an invisible judge that accompanies every thought, every gesture, every impulse. And the most perverse part of this process is that this judge is not outside of you. It lives within you. This internal surveillance is so subtle and so automated that most people don't even realize they are being constantly observed and judged by themselves. It's that nagging internal voice that says, "Don't talk too much. Don't show that you're excited." That's a ridiculous idea. No one will take you seriously. It's the discomfort that arises when you express yourself authentically, followed by a wave of embarrassment, as if you've just committed a crime for simply being true to yourself. It is this constant self-censorship, the deep need for approval, the irrational fear of not being accepted. This internal judge, shaped by your childhood experiences and reinforced throughout your life, settles in as a permanent, punitive instance within your psyche. It does not guide, it condemns. It does not correct wisely, it humiliates. And the more internalized it is, the more the individual confuses this harsh voice with their own conscience. But you must understand this. It is not conscience. It is conditioning. It is not prudence. It is fear disguised as reason. This system of surveillance acts like a prison without walls. It prevents you from experiencing the profound freedom of simply being who you are. Your desires are repressed, your ideas are filtered, and your spontaneity is sacrificed. You learn to live in a state of perpetual self-monitoring, constantly anticipating judgments, avoiding situations that might expose you to the gaze of others. But the real problem isn't the gaze of others. It's the introjected gaze, the one that is constantly triggering the alarm of shame from within. The philosopher Michel Foucault, in his analysis of the mechanisms of power and social control, described how the vigilant gaze becomes most effective when it is internalized by the individual. Power, then, no longer needs to be exercised from the outside in. It becomes automated, naturalized, internalized. Shame works in exactly this way. It is the psychological mechanism that ensures conformity without the need for external coercion. And what is the result of this? A life driven by fear, the fear of failure, the fear of being truly seen, the fear of not being enough. Shame empties you of your courage, your creativity, and your authenticity. It transforms you into a reduced, palatable, domesticated version of yourself. But if shame operates in such a silent and effective way, how can we possibly identify it? How can we perceive when we are under its control? To do so requires a meticulous work of self-awareness. It is one of the most challenging, yet liberating, steps in the journey of freedom. To begin, you must understand that shame lives in your language. Pay close attention to the words you repeat to yourself in moments of difficulty or vulnerability. Phrases like, "I am a failure," "No one will ever accept me this way," "I'm just not good enough," "I always mess everything up." All of these expressions are not just describing a situation. They are revealing the deep presence of shame. They are making an ontological statement about who you believe you are. This is the very heart of shame. It doesn't attack your behavior, it attacks your being. Another clear indication is the presence of avoidance patterns. Shame manifests when you consistently flee from situations where you might be seen more deeply. Do you avoid public speaking, expressing your opinions in a group, taking creative risks, articulating your desires, or setting firm boundaries? This avoidance is often not because of a genuine lack of ability, but because of a paralyzing, unconscious fear that by showing yourself, you will be unmasked as someone fundamentally unworthy. Shame thrives on this fear of exposure. Furthermore, it manifests in a wide range of self-sabotaging behaviors. Chronic procrastination, addictions, compulsions, social isolation, and perfectionism all have their deepest roots in shame. They are unconscious strategies to avoid the pain of judgment, the pain of rejection, the pain of not being enough. Often, the individual doesn't even realize they are sabotaging themselves. They just feel a constant weight, a deep fatigue, an internal voice that insists it's not worth trying. There is also a powerful tendency to project shame onto others. People dominated by their own internal shame often become highly critical, judgmental, or overly demanding of others. This happens because, by attacking on the outside, they are unconsciously trying to numb the unbearable pain they feel on the inside. It's as if they are saying, "If I cannot accept myself, then no one else deserves to be accepted as they are. Recognizing these signs is painful. It requires immense courage, patience, and a profound honesty with yourself. But it is also incredibly liberating. Because from the moment you identify the voice of shame, you begin to separate what is you from what is conditioning. You start to realize that this internal judge is not your truth. It is merely an echo of the past. And then, the inevitable question arises, what do I do with this awareness? Now that you have recognized the enemy, how do you deactivate it? How do you silence those internal voices that have been sabotaging your freedom for so long? The answer lies in the transformative power of self-compassion. Not the superficial version that trivializes suffering, but an active, deep, and courageous compassion. It is the light that finally destroys the shadows. In the next section, you will learn how to cultivate this transformative strength and finally begin to break the cycle of shame. Shame is a psychological parasite that can only survive in environments of darkness, silence, and secrecy. It feeds on what is not said, on what is hidden, on what you desperately try to erase within yourself. But when you summon the courage to look at it, to name it, to tell your story, even if it's just to yourself, something extraordinary happens. Shame begins to lose its grip. It doesn't vanish completely in an instant. It will still try to show up. It will still whisper old lies in your moments of greatest vulnerability. But now, you know that voice is not you. You know that pain does not define your worth. You know that prison is not eternal. Shame, once it is illuminated by the light of your awareness, begins to dissolve. Because it was never a truth to begin with, just a construct, a lie repeated so many times that it began to feel real. The key to living an authentic and courageous life is not in trying to become perfect. It is in allowing yourself to be fully, gloriously human. To err, to feel, to change your mind, to be vulnerable, to fail, and to continue loving yourself through it all. Shame tries to convince you that there is a dark, broken part of you that, if exposed, will make you unlovable. The divine truth is the exact opposite. It is only when you expose yourself, with all your beautiful imperfections, that real love becomes possible, especially self-love. At this very moment, you may be carrying the weight of old wounds, phrases you heard in childhood, looks that marked you, experiences that left deep scars. But now, you have the tools. Now, you have the language. Now, you know where to look. And when you can see clearly, you are no longer trapped. You no longer need to hide. You no longer need to mold yourself to fit into someone else's definition of acceptability. You no longer need to apologize for your existence. You are not your trauma. You are not your failures. You are not the distorted image that someone once projected onto you. You are a whole, worthy, and infinitely capable being. And from this day forward, every step you take toward your own truth will be a powerful blow against the internal system that tried to keep you small. If this video has touched something deep within you, I invite you to declare your intention in the comments below. Write, "I choose to live with truth." Your vulnerability can be the spark that inspires others who are still living in silence. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with them. Spread this light. And please, don't forget, keep watching. The next video is an important step on your journey. You have already begun this sacred process. Do not stop now. Shame will not control you again. Never again.